Jesse Haggard of 1484 Circlefield Court in a single-family residential R1B zoning district. Jesse is requesting a variance of 22 feet to install a non-privacy fence on the side yard of his property, 1484 Circleview Court, within the front yard of Fawn Vista Lane, 8 feet away from the sidewalk, in a single-family residential R1B zoning district. According to Sharonville Codified Ordinance 1125-10A, fences, walls, and hedges shall not be permitted along the side lot line or front lot line of any front yard. According to the code, corner lot properties have 2 front yards, so the property owner would be permitted to have a fence in their side and one side of their yard and their rear yard. The applicant has submitted a letter which was mailed to all board members and will be viewed on the next page, explaining why they feel the board should grant a variance. The property owner, we have notified all property owners who live within 100 feet of the property. We've received no calls leading up to the case, but we did receive an email from a neighbor who lives 2 doors down saying, I absolutely have no objection. I'm 2 doors down and his little doggy needs some room, running room. That's from Debbie O'Toole, who lives 2 doors down. So here's the letter submitted by the applicant. I will not read it for everyone, but the summary of it would be that the applicant says that about half of their backyard holds water for weeks at a time. They plan on having children eventually, and they would like space for the children to play. And they wish to have a fence in the higher area of their backyard, which would be not prone to flooding. So this is a view of what the property looks like. This is the side front yard. The front yard is anything past the corner of their house. So according to the zoning code, the applicant is permitted to have a fenced-in yard in this area as seen here. And as shown in the second picture submitted by the applicant, the area in blue is where there's frequent flooding in his backyard. Here are images from flooding over the past month that the applicant has submitted where there's sitting water. It's a little difficult to see, but I pointed out the images of where the sitting water is shown. So the applicant is requesting to increase the area in which they are allowed to fence in, but still maintain 8 feet of space between the sidewalk and the fence to have some sort of front yard view. The applicant is requesting to add this area for fenced-in area because it is outside of the blue flooded area. This is the type of fence that the applicant is proposing to install on his property. Not the exact fence, but it is a similar type of fence requested. So once reviewing the application, staff has decided, or staff would like the BZA to consider the following recommendations. And also we noted that there is a bit of hardship due to the sitting water in the backyard, and the placement of the house does reduce the amount of yard permitted because the side yard is very small comparatively because the house is up to the property line. So only the backyard is really an area that code permits a fence. But staff also finds that all corner lot properties have the same zoning requirement. And the property is not unique in the sense that all corner lot properties have the 2 front corner lot requirements. So if the board is considering approving this request, staff recommends that all improvements be maintained and kept in good repair to stay in compliance with the permit or the variance approval. So I believe Jesse and his wife may be on the call right now. I'm not sure if they would like to address the board right now or if the board has any questions before they start.
Yes, my wife and I are on the call. I'm Jesse Haggard. Our address is 1484 Circlefield Drive. I think you said Circlefield Court. The address is Circlefield Drive. And you pretty much summarized our letter very well. And I would like to be able to use some of that space on the side of our yard safely once we do have children. I think that's our main concern here is just being able to keep protection from the road.
Jesse, so my name is Tom Pernick on the board. Question for you. This
Yes.
ponding that you have, is that during rainfall events? Is that what is causing this?
Yeah, so it will rain. I mean, it's not a science, but for at least a week after it rains, typically that ground stays very, very wet. Um, and our neighbor's yard that is behind us, their house sets up a little higher than our yard, and so we get a wash down from that higher ground down into that low spot,
Right.
and it just sits there for a while.
Have you considered, installing a French drain, like digging a little trench and putting, those corrugated drainage pipes down to run out to the street to help with the drainage? I mean, just having ponding water doesn't seem healthy for basements or backyards in general.
So I've had two different companies out to look at grading the yard or similar solutions for that, and they ultimately, because there's a giant tree there also, they said if they cut in to do anything like that, it would put the tree at risk of dying, and would like to keep the tree.
And Sarah and John, so if that fence goes in, that still would not permit the applicants from erecting a shed or any other type of structure in that side yard. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, provided it met the setback. Although, just looking at this property, you can see his rear yard. It's a very small rear yard. I'm not sure from a zoning standpoint that they would meet the setback. I think it's 20 feet between the main structure and the accessory structure. So even with or without the fence, they would have difficulty. Probably have to seek a variance for that as well. That's the issue with a lot of corner lots, as you're aware.
Exactly. Thank you.
This is Matt Eggenberger. Do you have pets?
I do have a dog, yes.
I guess I'm asking then, what's the urgency for the fence? Because a child, you got 9 months after conception and then a few years before the child's up and running around. So, before you'd have to worry about the kid getting out of the fence.
It would be nice to have it for our pet also. But our main concern would be our future children. We would much rather have this sorted out now than try to deal with it when we're also nesting.
So where the tree is, I guess in the one picture I'm looking at, Jesse, and close to your patio, is that elevation raised up a little bit higher than as you go towards your property line on the left?
Yes, it is a little bit. It's not a lot. I don't know how I'd put a measurement on it, but it.
Okay. So would you say at your low point would be close to the property line in your backyard?
So it's probably, I'm looking at it right now, I guess 6 feet.
Okay. So going back to, I guess, the idea about having a drain there to help you out, actually, I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to impede this at all, but I mean, if you had your French drain towards close to the property line or something like that, you could certainly, I think it'd be far enough. I don't know. Those roots do spread out. I understand that, but I don't know. It certainly seems like a French drain that only drops down a foot deep or something like that would probably help you a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're considering that as well.
Mm-hmm.
In addition.
Yeah. So I guess the question I'm going to ask you is, if the ponding issue was addressed, would there be a need for this variance?
I think without the ponding issue, I would still prefer to have, I don't know, if you look in the one photo where I give the dimensions of what our backyard would be, I think it's 30, we'll be able to get about 30 feet deep and then 47 feet in length. I would like to have a much better use of my property if possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I will say, if you guys are thumbing through the thing I put together, I did have one typo on the sheet where it says proposed fence with variance. That dimension that I set for the back of the yard, I put 52 feet. It actually should say 69 feet. And that doesn't change the 22-foot variance that we're requesting. In case that number looked funny, that's why.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm on that page now. What was that dimension?
60. It should say 69 feet where it says 52 feet.
That's 69. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board from the board for the applicant? I can't talk tonight.
Okay, so not so much for the applicant at this point, but I guess for John and Paul, the purpose, what is our purpose for the setback on side yard? I understand it's considered a front yard, but what is the real purpose of that? Is it safety issues for the most part with traffic?
From a zoning code standpoint, and then John, feel free to jump in. It's typically based on the front yard setbacks of either side of the street. So it's trying to align the front of one house to the side of the next house so that you don't have large solid objects jutting out into a side yard. And that's not uncommon for a lot of zoning codes, older zoning codes, to not address side yard setbacks for fences or for other accessory uses on corner lots. But Sharonville's in the process now of revising their zoning code. I don't know if that's going to be something that's looked at, but zoning is typically written for what we call interior lots. So if you're looking at the area of the house to the left, to the right of the applicant's property, that's what zoning is typically written for. And the corner lots, unfortunately, seem to fall silent on how to properly address side yards or front yards. So in this case of the city of Sharonville, they've determined some time ago when the zoning code was written that corner lots shall have 2 front yards, a side yard and a rear yard. John?
Because Jesse's side yard now will become a front setback for his next door neighbor behind him, I guess. And because the neighbor behind him has a front yard setback of 30 feet, right?
Right.
Well,
Yeah, the only, can I just add one thing? I was looking, this subdivision was platted, I think, the late 1950s. Our current code was from 1983. Typically, in a new subdivision, corner lots are always platted differently now. They're usually deeper or wider on one side as opposed to the other. This particular lot is really no different than the others. So nowadays, if this were a new lot, it would be created in such a way so he would have a bigger yard to put a fence in. It's just when this was created, it was just created with the smaller, just like all the other lots.
Okay.
And with what you said earlier, having, if his fence were to project out further, it would not make the front yard of his neighbor, it wouldn't change the setback for them. Their setback would still be where their house is. They still could not build a fence past their house or do any other construction past their house. The property owner north of them on Fun Vista would still have the same setback requirements typical, unless they wanted to change it, which would require a variance.
Well, I'm that property owner, so what does it mean to me? I don't care whether they have a fence for their dog or not. I think they should.
Well,
Okay.
is it Ms. Tillapaw? Am I pronouncing
Yes.
that correctly? Okay. Well,
Right.
thank you for joining us. I know it's taking some time for your evening, but it's always good to hear from the neighbors. So let me do this just as a matter of procedure. Let me ask the board if there's any more questions for the applicant, and then I will open it up to you, and you can state your name and address for the record and speak
Sure.
your mind. So for the board, are there any other comments or questions at this time for the applicant?
No, I'm good.
Okay, we can start. Okay, and we can circle back around. So Ms. Tillepaugh, if you could state your name and address for the record, and then if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let us know.
Okay, well, I'm Michelle Tillepaugh and I live next door at 1463 Fawn Vista. As long as I can get my lawnmower down between our two houses, I don't care where they have a fence. Their dog needs one. They have to go out every single time to take the dog out on a leash, and he can't play or she can't play in the yard. She just has to stay on a leash, and I got a dog. I want all dogs to play.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So with your question, what does that mean to you? So obviously their fence could not extend beyond their property line. So you could still get your lawnmower back and
Okay.
forth between your side yard.
Right.
The applicant's fence is not a solid fence. So it's mostly transparent in terms of
Right.
its construction. And I don't know if I saw the exact height of this fence. Forgive me if I didn't see that, but how high is this fence going to be? How tall?
40 inches.
40 inches, so a little over 3 feet. Okay,
Yes.
so it's not terribly tall either.
Yeah. That's
So,
about the height of my chain link fence,
okay,
probably.
excellent. Does the board have any
Quick question.
questions? Yep.
Yeah, Paul,
Yes, sir.
it's Rob. The one picture that I'm looking at here along the side of the house on Fond Vista, you got brush, it looks like bushes and a tree. Would that stuff be removed for the fence, or would you leave that there?
The brush has been removed. The trees are still there, and the trees will remain.
Okay. And did the board, didn't you guys pass one on a house on at Grandview, and I can't think of the side street, about 4 months ago? Similar situation with the side yard facing Grandview.
Grandview and
front of the house.
Fernville.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that was one that was passed. And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily set precedent, but yeah, we have considered the fences in this situation on corner lots before, and we've approved the last one that we met and discussed.
Okay.
But again,
Thank you, sir.
Yep. All right. Any other questions or comments from the board on the variances presented this evening? Is there anybody else on the line that would wish to speak to this variance? I don't think we've heard from the 937 number. Okay. Hearing nothing. What's the pleasure of the board this evening? My 2 cents is that, again, it's an unusual lot. Corner lots typically do provide a hardship to the applicant, depending on where their house is sited. And as John mentioned, this house was platted sometime in the 50s, and the city does treat corner lots differently now by increasing the setback on corner lots so that an applicant could put a fence in without the need for a variance. I'm comforted by the fact that the fence is not a solid fence, so it's not a privacy fence, and it's not a tall fence. And Ms. Tillepaugh has not had an issue or does not have an issue with the erection of that fence. So I myself would consider this variance as presented with the caveat of the staff that it's erected appropriately with any necessary permits, and that it's maintained as necessary to remain in compliance with the zoning code and the building code for the city. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments from the applicant or from the board, I will ask for a motion on this variance as presented this evening.
I'll make a motion to accept the applicants as presented, the recommendation.
Okay, along with staff's recommendations as outlined in the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second
I'll
that.
second.
All right, thank you, Matthew, for the second. Mr. Creech, with that, would you please call the roll?
Motion to approve with condition. Mr. Coulter,
For the reasons I've stated, yes.
Mr. Ison,
Yes.
Mr. Eggenberger,
Yes,
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
and Mr. Goldie.
Unmute.
I think his connection is frozen, apparently.
Well, you do have 4 affirmative votes, so that
Right.
does carry regardless. If Mr. Goldie can hear us, if he would, at least for the record, send in an email, I guess, to Sarah, just to confirm what his vote was. So with that, your variance has been approved. Just be sure to work with the city in terms of getting any necessary permits. And I would encourage you to get a property survey if you haven't done that, so you don't encroach into Ms. Tilpaw's yard.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay, thanks.
Any other
Thank you all.
discussion? You bet. Any other discussion for this evening? I see that Compass Point Planning is going to be presenting to the Planning Commission later on this evening, the comprehensive plan.
So first, Jesse and Brittany, thank you for attending. You guys don't have to stay on to listen to the discussion items. But bye. And then the second, the discussion items would be that on July 8th, 2020, next month, Planning Commission will be hearing Compass Point Planning for the draft of the comprehensive plan. This will be a little bit more in depth than the previous presentations. So I just wanted to let you guys know, if you wanted to have an in-depth presentation of the comprehensive plan next month, stay tuned after the BZA meeting. Also, just because I know that we have discussed corner lot fences before, and it's been a bit of a discussion whether or not we wanted to allow them or not. I thought that would be something that we would want to revisit with the zoning code update. So if there are any other codes like that that you want to discuss that we can bring up to Wendy, just let us know. And if you have an idea of what it should be, also let us know so that we can continue the discussion for our zoning code update, which is currently underway. There are surveys online on Facebook and on the website if you'd like to take the survey. The second item for discussion is that on March 11th, 2020, we had a quorum for our meeting, so we did not have a vote. We wanted to ask board members if they were okay if we did emails instead of printed copies. We have and always have done email or printed copies of all board agendas and staff summaries. And going forward, we were wondering if you guys would be okay with an email or if you still wanted to have paper.
I'm fine with email.
Yeah, I'm fine with email as well.
me too.
I'm fine.
I'll speak for Dusty. He's fine too. And he owes us all a Goldie beef steak for not being able to talk on his iPhone. I don't even see him there now. Must be
Did we
ditched.
lose Mr. Pernick?
I lost him too.
We'll have to confirm with Mr. Pernick, but good.
And maybe just follow up with an email asking the question. But I think it sounded like everybody that was on the phone or on the Zoom call was fine with it. So save a little bit of money. All right. Is there any other discussion for the board this evening? No?
Just one question. How long do we think the Zoom meetings are going to be going on? Is this going to be into the future for a while, or?
No, I think this will probably be the last one because our office opens Monday to the public. So I'm envisioning July. We'll have the meeting there. Now we'll probably have to exercise some sort of social distancing and whatnot. Maybe wear masks. I mean, we will have to as city employees. But again, it may be Zoom. I'm not sure. I'm just assuming that, but we will definitely let you know.
Okay.
I know we're going to try to have our first council meeting in July. So our June council meeting will be on Zoom. So we're hoping to have our official in chambers council meeting in July, because they're going to have to put some desks in because we all sit close together going all the way around. So, or else sit in the audience. So that's what Kevin's hoping for.
Sounds good.
And Sarah, I do have a question. I know that talking about redoing things, there was a gentleman that came in front of the board regarding, and I know I talked to you about it, that with the fence or the pool on Lee Marie, that he's given a year to put a fence up. Is it possible that the board can look at that? If a person's got a swimming pool in their backyard without it having a tall enough fence for safety purposes, instead of it being a year, 2 or 3 months after it was installed, just a suggestion. The one neighbor's still complaining.
And
because-
Mr. Wessler,
Yes.
yeah, I hear from him all the time.
Okay. So, yeah. So
Yeah,
I just thought I'd bring that up.
That's something we can definitely consider either doing when the variance occurs at the meeting. Our standard is 1 year, but
Right.
if the board wants to make it shorter, they can definitely choose to say 2 or 3 months, and it can be at a case-by-case basis. Or if you think it's something that needs to be urgently done and standardized, that could be something that we could put in the zoning code update.
I'm just thinking with it being a swimming pool, so because
Yeah, but-
he's got a standard 3-foot chain link fence, and if
But
kids want in there, so
So, but the health safety code supersedes the zoning code. He couldn't have put that pool up without having to follow some type of regulation for that pool. So whether it's the pool, because I know sometimes it follows the height of the above ground pool and you have to have a removable ladder. Sometimes it requires a 3-foot or 4-foot fence with a
48
automatic
inches.
lock on it, 48 inches. So does he meet those standards right now? Because I think we were just looking at a privacy fence.
Right.
Or we were requiring a privacy fence.
He had a fence, he just
Right.
didn't have it privacy. I think that was the issue.
Right.
Yeah.
well,
And-
and then going around the perimeter, like the side yards, the only place he had somewhat of a privacy fence was by his back door stoop that would go from his driveway to the pool, but everything else is like 3.5 or 4-foot chain link fence.
Yeah, but the variance only took care of that privacy fence being erected, I think, between Mr. Wessler's property and the applicant's pool, because nobody else complained about it. And we can't go back and either change it or require that he put up an additional fence if he meets the standards of the life, health, and safety standards or regulations that are set up by the county or the state, whoever's enforcing this now.
Paul, I'd probably say, according to Paul, he didn't get any permits to put that pool back here in the backyard. So it was probably one of those deals to where they know nobody's working on the weekend. So,
Well, if he's in violation of that, and the city finds out, I don't even know if he needs a fence for an above ground pool that size. He probably does, or I think he should. But if
Right.
he's in violation of that other code, then that could nullify the variance. And I don't know, John and Sarah, you're more knowledgeable about the city regulations that relating to pools than I am, but I mean, what's,
I can try to reach out to Phil. He just lives around the
No.
corner from me.
no.
See how long it's been in there.
Well, okay, but that, we don't know. Phil could say it's
Right.
been in there for 5 years.
True.
And Phil
true.
takes snipes at this board every opportunity he can on Sharon Billings. I watch it. And he was there in the meeting. He was there in the meeting and he was okay with it at that time. If he wasn't okay with it, he should have said something. but obviously he didn't. And because he didn't, I don't care what he says right now. He had his opportunity to voice his disappointment, disagreement, whatever it was. He did it first, but then when we threw out the option, and I'll take responsibility for this. I said, what if we have him put up a privacy fence, because half of the property is a garage, so he can only see a small sliver. Phil's problem is that this guy has 2 loud parties.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard. So that's a different issue.
Right. That's the police issue.
So John and Sarah, if you can look into whether or not he has a permit for the pool, or if he even needs a permit for the pool, and if he's in violation of some health standard that, because again, in some instances in the county, if you have an above ground pool of a certain height, all you have to provide is a removable ladder. In other instances, you have to provide that removable ladder and a fence of a certain height with a self-locking gate. I don't know what they need.
Yeah, I don't need.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative about it, but I'm
tired
of Phil taking his shots at us.
I agree with you. Then he calls me, well, I don't think it's right that the ordinance reads it has to be within a year. And, it's like, well, Phil, you was down there, and, if you didn't, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Paul. He has, and I've seen it on Sharon Billions too.
Well, I do appreciate you, relaying that back to the board as a whole. I mean, that's maybe certainly something to consider in the future. But I don't know what we can do right now with this variance. We can't call him back in unless he's in violation of something that we said he had to do within a certain period of time.
That's fine. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
That way people are aware of it too.
Well, and again, I do thank you for it.
Not everybody's on Facebook.
Right.
Like we diehards are.
There you go. So I guess, John and Sarah, if there's something you can report back to the board, or if you know something now that that he's in violation, that would be helpful. And I don't have a problem bringing it back before the board for reconsideration if he is in violation of either the health code, that he didn't pull a permit and he needed to pull a permit, or he's in violation of some condition that we put forth in the variance that he had to remedy by a certain period of time and he didn't do it.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
Okay.
I believe that he called and complained to Donna and cited a whole bunch of code infractions, and me and her double checked all of them, and the only thing I could cite him for was that the setback did not meet the 15 feet requirement.
You're talking about Mr. Wessler called you?
What?
You're talking about Mr. Wessler called with the code infractions?
I don't remember the neighbor's name, but the neighbor who lives next to the person with the pool complained a bunch of infractions. And the only infraction that was unable to be remedied was the 15 feet. Everything else he resolved through payment of permit or Donna. So, but we can double check all the information to make sure. I mean, I never actually went out to measure his pool height, but there was a fence and there was everything else that technically needed to be except for the location.
Okay. Well, and if we can just go back out and show that he's not violating anything, or the violations he had are now remedied, the response can be sent back to Mr. Wessler if need be, and he'll still continue to complain, but at least the city's doing its part to validate that what he's been told to do and what he is doing now is currently legal within the city.
And while we're talking still, I'm back on the discussion side. We don't need to talk about it right now, but I just want people to think about it over the next month. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure the number we saw listed as an attendance to the meeting was a resident who was interested in maintaining an existing front yard fence. There's just not a permit for it. So because front yard fences have been brought up in discussion before, I think he wanted to listen to the topic. So he could understand what the board's feeling were on front yard fences, and just think it might be something for us to think more critically about what we actually want to do with front yard fences. because we've discussed it a few different ways. In some ways, we're okay with big variances, and some we're not okay with any variances. So just wanted the board to think about what they think the standard should be moving forward.
Sure, exactly.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Any other discussion before the board? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ison. Everybody have a great rest of the weekend, and it looks like the sun is out now instead of the tornadoes and hail and mayhem. So try to enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes.
Thanks, Paul. You have a good night yourself.
Bye, thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.